Maybe I have a suggestion. Maybe we should. Well, but my suggestion is the following one. So we give everyone one last chance for replying. One last chance, but then we will have. But the people here must also have a chance if we speak about democracy. So my first suggestion is we start with conclusory remarks with Professor Bauman, and then David Harvey, and then Mamdouh, and then Slavoj, because you already had your...
Got it.
If you all agree.
I already said more than I could, and I will stop on
Thank you, Professor Bauman.
I just want to, I read the history a little bit differently than Samir. I agree most of what you said, and I'm very well aware of what you wrote about volatility and everything, so I thank you for that. I don't... monopoly capital was a structure of global system within a nation-state structures in the 1960s. But if it had been monopoly capital ever since, how come we have the deindustrialization of the United States? How come we have a deindustrialization of much of Britain? And what happened to General Motors? You know, what happened to Pan Am? In other words, it's been highly competitive. But it's been competitive over a different terrain. It's been globally competitive instead of competitive within a nation-state structure. So I think the last period is very much of that sort. And this, I think, raises an issue, and we're not going to solve it here, which is, who's the enemy? Capital or imperialism? And you can say easily, when you use the concept of monopoly capital, it's both. But actually, over the last 30 years, they've been rather separate from each other, except on this financial sector. And I think that if you take imperialism to mean, I'll simply use it as an export of capital and control of production apparatuses outside of the country. Actually, a very interesting phenomenon has occurred that, for instance, suddenly, around the end of the 1970s, massive amounts of capital swept out of South Korea, all around the world. About 7 or 8 years later, from Taiwan. Now, capital's flying out from places like India and China, the two most important countries dominating the mining of copper in Zambia are Indian and Chinese. Now, is this imperialist or is it not? It's not imperialist in the sense that you're sending the army or something like that to suppress it. And actually, I'm not so sure that some of the imperialist games that are being played right now, because they are being played, no question. The US has an imperialist strategy, and we know what it is, it's been said. But I'm not clear, it's not clear to me that imperialist strategy actually favors capital all of the time. In fact, I think there's a bit of a disjunction between what's going on in these realms and what's going on with capital. Now, we have a little bit of a problem, I think, in terms of saying, well, okay, who do we fight against? And do we fight against capital and imperialism in the same terms, or do we have to change the terms? I don't know. I'd be very interested to hear what, how that's viewed in Egypt right now. Clearly there is American imperialist politics and Israeli pressures. Clearly that's playing a role, and a very important role that needs to be combated, but it seems to me what you need to combat that is not the same as what you need to actually create a socialist future internally within the country. And so I don't have a clear kind of answer to this, but it seems to me we ought to be aware of those distinctions and try to shape our thinking around by an analysis of what precisely is imperialism about in our particular time, and what is capital about, and are there contradictions between them, which actually can then be utilized by the left. That's another kind of aspect of it. short. I think you have raised very fundamental questions which are need to be cannot be discussed in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even 2 hours about what is really new at that present stage of the development of mature senile capitalism and imperialism. That is fundamental. Another set of questions, very complicated. Is it possible, and at what conditions, and what does it mean, to have, to construct?
Samir, if you can please be short, because some people are leaving their own table.
No, not a front. Not a front, but a rapprochement between the emerging countries.
Please give a big applause for Bauman. Because we're already talking like Castro and the people also need some praise.
I have some problems with this way of describing things and mixing everything up, so I cannot concentrate and I cannot discuss this way. I mean, and I will let the analysis to the white edit. I will speak about what I have experienced and seen myself. First of all, the only factors that we have in common between the Arab countries, there are two. One of them that we speak Arabic, more or less, all of us. The second one is the absolute dictatorships. But that's it. Everything else is different. So, this is about the Arab countries, and even the comparison between them is not allowed, in my opinion. I mean, not compared with Myanmar and Cuba and everything else. Anyway, the movement started, or it has been started, by the middle class. And this middle class start on January 25th, raised the participation the first and second and third day. And first in the fourth day, in Friday, 28th of January, the lower classes of the society entered the movement and made this significant change of balance. So, about this analysis, I will not now, but what Samir wanted to say, as he said, it is an anti-imperialist movement, was very clear, because I was in the demonstrations from the day one, every day in Tahrir, sleeping there and whatever. And everybody was following what's happening around, not only in Tahrir, but all over the country, by mobile cell phones. No? And the people, and believe me, it's energizing, magically energizing when you call in the demonstration anything and somehow 100,000 people are calling the same word. It's magic. And the people will never shout what they don't will. And everything was very clear. When, as an example only, when Mubarak appointed Omar Suleiman as vice president, the minute later, we have heard this, was no Mubarak, no Suleiman, both of them are American collaborators. The people on the street, the very ordinary people, including the lower classes, they have not studied political sciences in order to combine and associate between their own misery along the 3 decades and this love relation between the United States and Israel on one hand and the Mubarak regime on the other hand. This is the anti-imperialist tendency what Samir meant without getting into more details. Thank you.
Thank you.
More and more perplexed. Now we are not allowed even to compare the Arab countries, but we began with this bombastic statement that the Arab movement is part of a global movement from Africa to Latin America, so I'm slightly perplexed.
Only inspiring, that's it.
No, sorry, the word was not inspired. So when it fits you, you can put it in a global movement. When it fits you, you cannot even look into Syria. But no, it's only Egypt and so on. That's my first problem. My second problem, but this is just an empirical one. People don't shout when they don't vote. If there is a statement which is in the best British tradition, million times falsified, is this one. And do I even need to mention examples from our own past, from Hitler's Germany and so on? I will even say that it's when big numbers of people are gathered to shout, it's very rare that they shout authentically. As a rule, they shout bullshit for the ruling ones. That's just an empirical statement. But let me go on. What really made me sad, this year I don't get, both of you, is this ironic remarks, ha ha ha, and there is no Myanmar and so on. Sorry, we live here, I am more than you internationalists. We live in global imperialist world. Our strategy should not be, we suffer here, fuck Myanmar, but China is doing to Myanmar what, yes, American imperialist is doing to Egypt. Why don't we get together and build the same global struggle? Why are you not saying this? Why are you always dismissing Myanmar? For me, this is exactly two faces of the same struggle, and it's the same as you say, about this Saudi Arabia.
No. I mentioned this because I was keeping the image of the revolution in Egypt. The revolution in Egypt had recognized the relationship between the Mubarak regime and the United States and Israel. No Myanmar and no Cuba, and this does not mean I am against anything happening in Myanmar or in Cuba. It is just not discussed. That's it.
Here I would even go a step further. From what I was talking about, no, sorry, I will not go into the direction because I want to say more about the Israel. But what I'm saying is that, wait a minute. First we talk about global monopoly system, we know who is the enemy. Now if there is a global system, we have to fight it globally. You cannot play this game of, okay, you experience it like this, sooner or later you will have to widen your experience.
No, the fight is local. We can discuss globally, to analyze, to understand, but the fight is always local. I'm not going to have a situation. It's always local.
I totally
disagree. It has to do its own work.
Perfect. So you see, I would like to know what you think. So you think, I'm sorry, for the Americans the fight is not local. They are intervening everywhere. What would you say to Afghans? Sorry, I will not help you, fuck you, that's your local fight. No, the enemy is not local. The enemy is local. So I'm just asking you, what you would say, for example, to Cuba intervening in Angola and Ethiopia? Sorry, you didn't respect your local rules or whatever. No, maybe it was a wrong intervention.
Is again mixing everything.
No.
We are not now discussing Cuba or Angola and Nasser intervened in Yemen and so on. This is not the way I can discuss anything.
But then, don't talk about global imperialism. Talk about it.
No, I spoke and will always speak about global imperialism. This is something obvious for me and even obvious for the common people on the street.
No, they read these newspapers. In what sense it is obvious? I'm not saying it's a wrong ideology, but what do you see? Are you a magician who walks in the street and sees globality like a Platonic mystic who doesn't see concrete forces but sees force as such? And I agree with you, you do see global capitalism. And the same global capitalism is seen by Cubans and by others. No, one more. You know where we see this global capitalism? I deeply agree what you said about this deep alliance, United States, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, even as we know, owns, according to some sources, because where do all the billions go, apart from the billions spent for the corrupted lives of the rich, or to which white girls, drugs, you want in Saudi Arabia, I agree with this, goes into investing in the United States. They own, I think, according to some sources, that's an interesting data which explains this link between United States and Saudi Arabia. Yeah, of the whole United States. You know who also owns 7 to 10%? China. What is it? Let's talk about this. And no, you don't have there out China the enemy. You have China which is up to its neck in American financial markets. That's globality.
So, before we give some questions, first of all, I must apologize. Maybe there was some blood because I started with such a question, and of course we started with the detailed. Can you speak on the mic?
No.
Fuck you! Don't speak privately. We are at a public event.
He said he's accusing me publicly, but saying he's my friend.
That's what I'm always doing.
You remember when Stalin was arresting Bukharin? Bukharin turned to Stalin and told him, but Koba, we were also friends, always. Why are you not into that? And Stalin told him private, but we are still friends. This is not personal.
I think all of us here are friends, and it was very interesting. I mean, we were on the same side.
This is the truth.